What's up, everybody? You are listening to Locked On Now NHL, local experts with the biggest stories on the ice. I'm your host, Daniella Bruce, and thank you for making Locked On Now your first listen every weekday. We've got our Locked On NHL host here to tell you everything you need to know as teams around the league start up the second half of the season. Let's start in Boston for last night's biggest game.
The biggest game.
The Pittsburgh Penguins went down early to the Bruins in Boston last night, but bounced back with 4 goals in a row to take over the game and take the win. Our Locked On Penguins host explains how Pittsburgh made up for their slow start.
Well, Penguins break their 4-game losing streak on Tuesday night. They take down the Boston Bruins 4-2 after being down 2-0 going into the second period. I'm Hunter Hodes, the host of the Locked On Penguins podcast. It wasn't a pretty game for Pittsburgh, but when they needed to, they hit on the counterattack. 3 goals in the second period, 2 by Danton Heinen, 1 by Sidney Crosby. That was his 499th career goal as he's chasing lucky number 500. Goaltender Tristan Jarry continues his Vezina caliber season, and the Penguins are able to skate out of Boston with the win, even with Brad Marchand's dirty antics towards the end of the game. For a full game recap, you can check out the Locked On Penguins podcast wherever you get your podcast.
After blowing a 2-goal lead at home, Locked On Bruins isn't sure where to go from here as he gives you the Boston side after the loss.
It's been a bit of an I don't even know where to start night for the Boston Bruins. This is Ian McLaren, host of Locked On Boston Bruins, and the hits literally kept on coming over the course of the night for this team. First of all, they jumped up to a 2-0 lead over the Pittsburgh Penguins, only to allow 4 straight goals and lose this game 4-2. Meanwhile, reports are coming out that Tuukka Rask's attempted comeback is not working out, and he could announce his retirement within the week. On top of that, star center Patrice Bergeron had to leave the game after a collision with Pittsburgh Penguins franchise player Sidney Crosby, and Brad Marchand, perhaps in some frustration about the game, about losing Bergeron. Maybe he heard the Tuukka Rask news as well. He decided to basically punch Pittsburgh Penguins goaltender Tristan Jarry at the end of the game, putting his availability for the next game in doubt, pending a look by the NHL. So that's a lot to take in, and I will cover all of it more in depth on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. So please do subscribe and catch up on all things black and gold with me, Ian McLaren, host of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
The New Jersey Devils got back in the win column last night by beating the Canadiens in Montreal, and our Locked On Devils host was more than happy to say goodbye to Jersey's 7-game losing streak. He tells you all the details from a long-awaited win post-game.
What's up? This is Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils, and here is my post-game reaction. So, hallelujah. The New Jersey Devils have finally snapped their 7-game losing streak. They beat the Montreal Canadiens by a score of 7-1. I forgot what it's like to be a dominant team. Jack Hughes is still out. Mackenzie Blackwood is still out. Dougie Hamilton is still out. And the fact that we were able to absolutely dominate in this game, albeit it was against the Montreal Canadiens, one of the worst teams in the NHL, but still, a win is a win. John Gillies was fantastic in between the pipes, though he is inconsistent at times. I'm glad that he was on one tonight. Overall, the New Jersey Devils should be satisfied with this win, but I don't think it really changes that much because we're still a bad team and we just went up against a worse team. But at the same time, a win is a win. 7-game losing streak finally over. And like I said, I forgot what it's like to be a good team. So is this what it's like? I hope we could do this again sometime. Probably not, though.
The Minnesota Wild is one of the best teams in hockey, but the second half of the season didn't start the way the first one ended for the Wild. And our Locked On Wild host tells us how Minnesota suffered in its first shootout of the season in Winnipeg.
Kähkönen was great. Hellebuck was just a little bit better. Hey, everybody, Seth Topol, host of Locked On Wild, recapping the Wild's 2-0 loss to the Winnipeg Jets to begin the second half of the season. Wild, a little sluggish out of the gates, and whether it be the rest over the All-Star break or any number of factors going to Canada in which there are really no fans to speak of, in those arenas. Just seemed like the Wild had a little bit of a sluggish efforts getting into this game. Obviously, Connor Hellebuck did not allow a goal the first time the Wild have been shut out this season. Their 10-game point streak snapped. Kirill Kaprizov and Kevin Fiala's point streaks snapped. But at the end of the day, as this Wild team typically does, it takes a lot to shut out this Wild offense. So sometimes you just got to give credit to the opposing goalie, who was due, I think, for a standout performance here this season. Unfortunately, it came against the Minnesota Wild. Wild are off until Saturday. They'll have a chance to regroup, and they always do, taking on the Carolina Hurricanes at home for a chance to pick up win number 29 on the season. For more on the Minnesota Wild, make sure to follow Locked On Wild wherever you listen to podcasts.
And that's all for Locked On Now NHL. Thank you again for making Locked On Now your first listen every weekday. And now that you're done here, make sure you make your second listens Locked On NHL in your team's local Locked On podcast. I'm Daniella Bruce, and this has been Locked On Now.